is true to the gospel message. So this week's been one of those weeks. And I don't know, I just want to kind of open up the floor today and just kind of be like, what's the Lord been teaching you this week? What's going on in your heart this week? As there's just so much coming at us, and there's so much, I don't know, what do you call what's been happening this week? There seems to be momentum, but there's still a lot of angst.
Viola Davis is calling it a revolution. I'm praying for revival in our churches. I think there are conversations that are happening that have been a long time coming. But I don't know if this is, like you said, momentum toward a revolution. I don't think we're there yet. Or a revival. I don't think we're there yet.
It reminds me of a Sam Cooke song. Sam Cooke, soul singer, been dead for many years. And he was an African-American guy who experienced a ton of stuff in his career, but he was one of the first crossover artists.
Oh.
One of the very first black artists to be warmly received by a white audience.
Mm-hmm.
And he did one song on race issues. The rest of them were like Twisting the Night Away and all that stuff. And it was called Change Is Gonna Come.
Oh.
And the chorus is, it's been a long, long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's a good song.
I wonder what made him write that. Was it during civil rights? Or
it was his experiences.
Wow.
He says it in the verses if you listen carefully. Because it's a beautiful song, and you could miss the lyrics, but he's like, you know, he's been told, hey man, you can't hang around here.
Oh wow!
Like there were black artists back even when Motown was hitting it, where there were certain areas where there's just nowhere to stay.
Oh my gosh!
Even for the most famous people in the country, it's not the world.
You mentioned Aretha Franklin and her stories. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, she demanded cash before she played, not just because she was a diva, and she was, but because there was times where she was stiff.
Oh my goodness. Hi Nathaniel. I haven't seen you comment in a while. Good morning. He says good morning.
Hey Nathaniel.
Mike Isaac.
What's up, Isaac? Fun having you on the air today, man.
Yeah, you're awesome. Victoria. Ooh, let me see if I can find you. I haven't seen your name in a while. Oh wow, Janelle. Hi Victoria. I think she goes to Pastor Morrison's church, and she works for Domestic Violence and Advocacy Center. You
She's
are awesome,
you.
Victoria. Yes, I had to visit your Facebook page.
I like that picture of the doggy putting his head out the window. It's one of my favorite things, is seeing doggies with their heads out the window. They're so happy with that.
Yeah. So Follow Up Friday continues. Anything you guys want to talk about? Today was quite the show. Lots of texts and calls.
We didn't mean to spend the whole show on race issues today. We started off with a different topic. Somebody was disappointed in me and how I handled a story about my kids. We talked about that for a little while.
Yeah.
And then it transitioned into race issues. I forget how we even got there.
Tough conversations.
Yeah, because you had a tough conversation in your life just yesterday. But we were hanging on to a follow-up item that had nothing to do with any of that. But we never got to it.
Yeah.
Because the conversation kept rolling.
It does feel like you say, like we're all having the same conversation. You know, because we stayed there because in different ways, people have been processing what's going on. I love Martha's call and her struggle with the rioting and people's personal property being destroyed. And then the heart of God's people with racism. You shared Dr. Mark Job's heart on this, and he's been very vocal recently.
Very vocal. Like if you think we're crazy or something, you can go check out any statement released by Dr. Mark Job, president of Moody Bible Institute.
Yeah.
And you'll go, oh wow, I guess they're just doing what their leader wants them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Carrie, good morning. She says, true peaceful protester came down to Warren and Youngstown. If people really care for the town, they do what they can and have that talk and love all people. We all bleed red and created by God.
Sounds like Carrie's saying that there were peaceful protesters in Warren and Youngstown, and that's great.
It's really awesome.
I think there's some other correct things there, but
Lorraine has been doing a great job. Sarah from Ecuador says, any chance you could bring on professionals from Cedarville or another guest to educate us on qualified immunity and why it matters? Immunity, like in terms of police, do you think?
I don't know much about it. I think we got to find the right guest to talk about systemic injustice.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what she's pointing to.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Maybe it's Mark Caleb Smith. I don't know. I don't know if he does the micro poli-sci.
Yeah.
He does macro. He looks at systemic issues and like constitutional issues. I don't know if he looks at it that closely.
Good morning, Danella, Roseanne, Rob is here, Pooja, hi girl, Jennifer, Dr. Jennifer for Brian, and Eva. Happy Friday, Eva. I'm excited. Any plans for today? We got some watching to do because if you haven't seen it on my personal page, I shared a link, Just Mercy, which I haven't watched. Warner Brothers is making it free for the entire month of June.
So good.
Because there's many of us that are learning and having open hearts, open minds, and listening. And so they're encouraging people, if you want to start learning about systemic issues in the justice system, that's a great movie to watch. You've watched it. So my point is, we're going to take the weekend for that, watching stuff. That's one. But
we're actually going to watch that this weekend too.
Oh, you're going to watch it again?
Sarah and I went and saw it in the theater,
okay.
Which isn't like us. I usually reserve the theater for movies that need a theater venue, and a dialogue-driven story doesn't need the theater, but we did anyway. Whoa! You gotta watch Just Mercy, and you've got to stick with it when it's over. Just wait for a minute, because at the end of Just Mercy, this is for you too.
Yeah.
They do follow-up on some of the characters in the story, the real people.
Yeah.
And what happened to them. You've got to watch it. If
you want to watch it, one of the things I've seen people ask on social media is where, because Warner Brothers, it's a new movie.
Where is it?
They're making it free. Go to Amazon Prime.
It's on Amazon.
Prime Video. Yeah, look it up on Amazon. It is free for the whole month of June. So that's just a good family thing to do. Cherry, good morning. She says, I think I have a good person for you to talk to about systemic racism. Should I text her name to you?
Yeah, send us an email, actually, would be the best way to do that, Sherry. You want to, somebody, Kelly or Janelle, can you reply? I don't have access to this. I'm not being a diva. Maybe just give her our email address.
Victoria says, or Lydia says, I have appreciated Moody Radio's resources and conversations this week. I'm having a hard time dealing with the injustice in our place as Christ followers.
Lydia, isn't that hard? It's been a hard week.
So how can you, she's from Akron. She's a teacher, right? Secondary. That's cool. Yeah, a lot of people are feeling that, Lydia. Brian, any encouragement? She's like the conversation, but she's like uncomfortable. I think a lot of people feel that. It's uncomfortable. You don't know what to do. You feel helpless. To be honest, we feel uncomfortable because it's highlighting such a big issue that's so intrinsic and all built into our system and the country, and it feels discouraging because it's like, where do you start? It's so sad. So many lives lost. So many, Franklin County, which is kind of where Columbus is, and actually it just happened in Cuyahoga County. The leaders making racism a healthcare issue and saying that it actually is a problem. It's a good start, but it's just like, oh my gosh, like, will we even get to the point where we fix this?
Yeah,
so I get where Victoria's
part of the journey, though. Part of the journey is educating yourself. Don't go to your favorite pundit who says it like they think it is. Do some research and find out from people you don't normally listen to that are credible.
Yeah. About
these issues. It takes a lot of time.
Derek says, good morning, Brian and Janelle. Brian, at the end of the show, you spoke up about police reform. Yep. I can tell you, as a former police officer, the unions are very strong. They can help you, but they also protect bad officers.
Yeah, in fact, I'd encourage, if you want to educate yourself on that particular issue, the New York Times does a daily podcast called, creatively, The Daily.
Brian must be in charge of that one.
And they did an episode on Tuesday this week, and it's called The Systems That Protect the Police. You could actually just hit rewind on this or whatever, hear me say it again, but The Systems That Protect the Police. It was Tuesday's episode. It's only like 25 minutes long, and we've been passing it around in our team. And it describes, from a reporter's perspective who's done research on this, the complex bureaucracy that makes it basically impossible for a reform-minded police chief to lay off an officer who is an embarrassment to the profession and should be laid off. Can't do it. And officers regularly are reinstated after committing egregious acts.
Yo, isn't that the same? Like, would we be comfortable if the teachers union did that? Like, there are times where our kids are in danger, even sexually, with teachers. Would we be comfortable as a society knowing there was a union protecting teachers that our kids were exposed to?
Yeah, and teachers' unions are pretty powerful.
But I've seen teachers.
And teachers' unions need reform. But you're right. There are systems in place where there is a line that seems to exist by which if you cross it, there's just no exception. But you've got to wonder what the problem is in a system where the head of the union in Minneapolis for the police department has already been demanding or at least requesting the reinstatement of all 4 officers.
Wow.
So if that's the case, we all got problems.
Yeah. Amanda says, this was my eye-opener this week. I had a foster child placed in my home that is darker skin color than my son. My son is mixed with Hispanic, but he looks absolutely white. My son and my foster placement started playing with Nerf guns in our home. All of a sudden, they got excited saying they were going to go to the football field across the street for me to play with Nerf guns. I live in a predominantly white area, and at first I said, okay, just be safe. And the more and more I thought about it, the more that I asked them to just stay home and play here. Why? Because of Trayvon Martin. I realized I felt much more safe with my son of lighter colored skin being safe across the street than I did with the child God brought to our house for the weekend with darker skin color. It was a huge eye-opener for me how parents of African American descent have to educate their children differently about the hate in this world. It was very difficult, much needed conversation.
Whoa.
We lived that.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's
wow.
so, yeah. And the way
Thank
she
you.
had to experience the two, because she doesn't have to do that with the other son. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda.
Wow, what a story, Amanda.
Yeah.
You got to do something. Have you posted that on social media, like yourself?
Yeah.
You'd start getting all these shares. I'd share that. Tell that story. Don't just tell it here. Wow, that's good.
Yeah, tell that story. Lydia says, being of Indian ethnicity, I am educating myself about white privilege. I understand health inequity and disparity and how it is associated with racism and poverty. Can you speak on that? Or do
Is
you know
this our
about
friend Lydia from Akron, the nurse?
I think so. So we can visit. You want to visit?
Is that you, Lydia? It must be our friend Lydia, the nurse from Akron.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she calls often. We love when you call Lydia.
I miss you. It's been a while. What do you want me to speak on? You're trying to give me to
Health
speak on?
inequity and disparity and how it's associated with racism and poverty in the healthcare system? Or is that too heavy? That's a lot.
It's a lot. I would just say I appreciate... Oh, it is her. Yay, Lydia!
We love you, Lydia.
Oh, I miss you. Yeah, all I can say is I stand with you on the importance of educating ourselves on those things. And it really isn't that hard. I think about how hard it was years ago, not even that long ago. When I was a kid, I got an assignment from my teacher, and it was, what does Roy G. Biv stand for? What does that mean? I didn't know at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We had to go to the library, people. We had to get in the car.
That's hilarious.
We had to talk to a librarian.
Dewey Decimal System thing. Yeah.
And now I can in seconds get an answer to that.
Yeah.
Like, educating ourselves in this day and age, there really is no excuse to not do it.
Yeah. Amanda says, I gave Ben paint about it. Especially because yesterday I was reading the Bible and read how David literally thanks God replacing his enemy's necks under his knee.
Oh, you know what? Amanda just edited that comment.
I have been thinking about it because yesterday I was reading the Bible and I was reading where David literally thanks God replacing his enemy's neck under his knee.
Oh, wow.
That's the one with the play guns, right?
Yeah. And then she said stupid voice text. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even worse, Janelle does the swipe thing. What is that?
Swiping is awesome. Look it up on your keyboard. Instead of like going like this, you can just swipe and it's amazing.
Anybody who's watched Dora the Explorer knows swiper, no swiping.
Gosh.
Dora condemned swiping a long time ago.
Danella says, definitely feeling uncomfortable with everything. Rob says, Good morning. Yes, the follow-up to the movie was great to see. This has been a hard week and a great week. True dialogue with people and a spotlight on issues we've avoided. Amen.
Yeah, man, it was hard. Hard week, yeah, but a good one nonetheless. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for you, Janelle, but there's parts of the end, the very end, the postscript, so to speak, of that movie, Just Mercy, that are encouraging and parts that are crushing. That's all I'm going to say.
Jennifer says, we appreciate you for rethinking your decision and protecting him.
Oh, yeah, everybody's encouraging Amanda. Yeah, Amanda, look at the impact of that story you told. You've got to keep telling that story.
Yeah. Lydia says, love you both. You both create a safe space for me to express my thoughts and views.
Praise the Lord. God gets all the glory. It's part of the mission he's given us, friend.
Victoria, I just sent you a text of Sam Cooke's song, Peace and Blessings.
Yeah, the lyrics of Change is going to come.
Isaac wanted to know well, we don't have to go there, but what other topics was it that you never got to talk about? It was really just reviewing the week. It was a great listening to Ron. Oh, Gary loved listening to Ron this morning.
Yeah.
Gary, your dude. Jennifer says no. What are you doing, Brian?
I was looking up the lyrics of Change is going to come. Here's the one where Sam Cooke said it. So
hi, Sheila. Go ahead.
In verse 3, he says, I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me, don't hang around. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know the change is going to come. And when you know the context of that, when that song was written and released, it's that was a bold statement at the time. Oh, what a good song. Go look it up. Wow. It's so beautiful. What are you asking me? Oh, the other topic?
No. After that, I said, Carrie says, I blessed to go to church that got black, white, and we did have Spanish people. I love them all. I don't want to be discouraging, but I've seen several people saying, well, I go to a church that's mixed. Thank God.
Just because you're in a multicultural church doesn't mean that your church doesn't have race issues.
Yes. There's relationship stuff that people avoid. Just because you see different races, don't think that there are not conversations that need to be dealt with. Lydia says, how do we help our friends see that acknowledging white privilege does not make them racist? Please help with that, Brian. Speak up.
I don't know, Lydia.
Why is that a trigger word? People feel guilty. I've heard some white people say, I've struggled too, and I wasn't wealthy, and I was... Just help, I guess.
There's, I don't have a perfect answer to this, Lydia, because I've tried and I don't know how to explain it. And it's like white privilege is one of those 2-word phrases that if you say it, people go apoplectic and they can't even hear what you're saying. There's actually, if you wouldn't mind, this is going to sound very vain, but if you can quick go to my Facebook fan page, I posted an article from Phil Vischer, Bob the Tomato, where he describes privilege from a perspective I think that's really understandable. And when it comes from a tomato, I mean, who could dislike it?
Hello.
Everybody likes tomatoes. And Bob the Tomato at that. So it's going to be, it's not that one, it's not there, it's, and we can link it here. Go up. Go up. Right there.
Right here?
Yeah, Racial Justice Has Benefited Me, a Confession. It's at holypost.com, written by Phil Vischer, follower of Jesus, co-creator of VeggieTales. Can you put that link?
Wow, that's cool.
Can you put that link?
Yeah, I'm going to put it right now.
On the answer to Lydia's question. If you want to see it, I'd recommend it because he's so funny. Like, he finds a way to, with creative writing and storytelling, to tell his story, but it's creative, it's funny, it's a lot of things. And maybe it'll help. You didn't hit enter, so she's never going to see it.
No, I know. I was going to shorten it for her. So, but basically what you're saying is that you can't...
I've never found a way to do it because it's such a lightning rod word.
Do you know where it comes from? Why does it bother people?
I think it bothers people for legitimate reasons. Talking to somebody who's white who grew up in an impoverished or abusive situation, it's difficult for them to hear someone say they were privileged when they feel like they were hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you think that's it?
Yes. But why is highlighting systems in terms of the workplace, in terms of when you get stopped by the cops, the way you're viewed, like to highlight a system and how you live and get to live and navigate through it, and how different it is to me. Why can't that be received? That's where we're talking about with privilege.
It's one of those times where I wish I could find a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Because what it's not saying is that because, like, let's just say you got someone who lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere in a trailer park with a drunk father and they're white. That's not, they don't feel privileged, nor should they feel privileged.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that because you didn't live a privileged life that there aren't things in society that go to the advantage of a person just because they're white. But it sounds dismissive of a person who grew up and struggled who's white.
Yeah.
When we call it white privilege. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I had a better word for it.
A little boy that lived next to us years ago, and he was white, and he actually lived in an abusive home, and he would spend his days out in the neighborhood, and he would be stealing bikes. He actually stole one of our bikes one time. Stealing bikes, the cops would come, bring him home. He was like 11, all the time, bring him home, bring him home. And my husband had to have a conversation with Isaiah and say, you cannot hang around him even when we're around him, because he said you're gonna be confused, like you're with him in terms of the bad things he does. And he was like, your experience with the cops will be very different to his experience with the cops. So he was like protecting him with like, don't think they most likely won't just come and drop you off, you know? And that's where we don't call it privilege, but that's where Isaiah had to start learning. You got to be mindful whether we like it or not. There are just things you got to stay away from explicitly because it's just so unfair. I don't know. Is that...
I think part of the reason it's so hard is because people don't want to see it, even though it's blatantly obvious. Like, the best one I can think of would be just maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago, there were people armed with fully automatic weapons in the Michigan State House, screaming in the face of police officers and someone spitting at them. And I didn't hear anybody saying, like, whoa, calm down about the protesting here. This is America. You can protest. And no one's condemning the spitting in their faces or screaming in their faces. You see, like...
And it was about masks and can we open our...
Isn't it clearly indicative of a different standard if a bunch of angry white people can go stand with fully automatic weapons in a state legislature and not be called thugs or be dragged out? Or
Rob is helping us express it because Josh Villa, our boss, put on his Facebook page, white privilege doesn't mean you didn't have struggles in life. It means being white wasn't one of them.
There you go. I still wish we had a different word. I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that.
Privilege?
White privilege just doesn't... Like, it doesn't...
Helpful.
Like, my mom lived a comfortable life. I think she might even be here. But her father was an emotionally and verbally abusive alcoholic. Don't tell her that was a privilege. Because it wasn't. She had a hard existence with her parents.
That wasn't. But I feel what Rob is saying. Black people... Some experience all of that, and then on top of that, when you go to the store, on top of that, just your skin color is adding to all of that.
Yeah, and see, I get that, and my mom gets that, but there's a certain, like Lydia's right, there's just this certain contingent in society that, I don't know how many ways we could say it. It's not going to get through.
Yeah. Susan says, yes, Brian, that is white privilege. I would have been on the news and under the jail.
Mike is bringing up a good point. Brian, were they automatic weapons? Yeah, you're right. They were not illegal weapons because they would have been arrested for that. Whatever the weapons they had they were legal in that area. But, I mean, could you imagine if a group of black men grabbed a bunch of guns, wore them in full view, and marched into the Ohio State House?
Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine.
And that's the comparison. And isn't that a perfect example?
Perfect example right now.
But Mike, good point. Thank you.
Roseanne says, Brian, I beg to differ. The protests in Michigan were widely criticized, and we certainly personally condemned that abhorrent behavior. We didn't go and riot in the streets,
I'm sure.
Over it, but we object to it.
Yeah, I guess there were some people who disagreed with that. I think the outcome would have been different if it was black men doing that. I'm just trying to say, it's not a perfect example, and you make a fair point. I'm just trying to say that it's the parallel of trying to illustrate in modern America
the reality of that there is a certain privilege that goes with being part of the majority culture. But again, I don't like the phraseology
Yeah.
because it's become so condemning.
Danella is looking for the Daily News article that you referenced earlier. What is it called again?
It's the New York Times podcast.
I'm gonna
It's not
get
Daily
Sandra.
News podcast. It's called
It's
The
right here.
Daily.
The Daily.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you can you find that episode even? I don't know how we.
The Daily System something. No. System was whatever. Oh my gosh. So I'll go to the podcast and then it'll list, I guess, the Daily podcast here. And then give her the link to that in particular.
I think so. Systems.
This one?
Yeah, click on the arrow or whatever. Let's click on that. Not play. There's the share thing. Do you see upper right? Right. Move to the side. Whip. There you go.
That's not share.
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
Click that. Click the copy. There you go. Link copied.
And so,
Reply to.
who was it? Danella? I think it was Danella. Yeah, right here. Okay, Danella, I'm giving you the link to that episode.
You gotta love Facebook Live. We're sitting here
Right
finding a
here.
link. Sit enter. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Lots of comments. Susan, if black men came to the state house with guns, they would have been arrested and maybe shot.
And what's interesting is if you watch certain documentaries, you can look up in California. In California, there used to be some really wide open interpretations of the Second Amendment, but restrictions on gun ownership and carrying a gun changed in California in response to one incident. Do you know about this?
No.
It's when a group of African American protesters in the late 60s, early 70s, I forget when,
I remember that. Yes.
legally brought their legally owned weapons,
Mm-hmm.
their open carry weapons, and went to the State House in California.
Yes.
Just like what happened in Michigan. But this was back in the 60s, 70s, I forget the year.
Oh, yeah.
And people flipped a
Yeah.
lid
Yes.
to the point that suddenly one of the most permissive Second Amendment interpretations in the country in California became one of the more restrictive.
Crazy.
Second Amendment restrictions entered into California because of black men protesting. Look it up. I don't
Isaac
remember what it's
says
called.
that's exactly what it is. The Black Panthers held an armed march protest and it was peaceful and they had no trouble. No, but actually it was that group that the laws changed on.
Look up the response to that, Isaac, because when it
Yes.
happened in California, even though they couldn't be arrested because it was legal, people went nuts and panicked.
Yeah.
And were suddenly willing to surrender some of their Second Amendment
Yeah.
rights.
Dorothy says people marching peacefully are being gassed and beaten and injured and losing eyes, and white men can walk into a state house armed to the teeth and spit in an officer's face. If you can't see that, then you're blind.
And that's kind of what I'm saying, Dorothy. It's like, if you look at those two situations and you can't see the disparity, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah says many of us did, yes, but the president called them upstanding citizens who are just angry. The difference in how he has addressed the current situation is so different.
Yeah, and we'll let you guys talk politics if you want. We're just going to stay out of that.
Deborah said, Dorothy says, when police officers use force, they need to be held accountable no matter who you are. This is a huge problem and it needs to be fixed, changed. It needs to happen now.
Well, I would only amend, Dorothy, some of that. Like, there are situations because of the authority we've given police officers and because of the necessity of the jobs they do, they need to have the ability to use force legally.
Yeah, they do.
But what we don't have are consequences when they have proper consequences and proper means of accountability when they abuse that authority.
Yeah.
That's the distinction I think we need to make very clear. My wife was a police officer, my father-in-law was one, and there were times when they had to use force. They did so legally, respectfully, and appropriately. That's part of what a police officer does.
Yeah.
Is they protect us from people who are dangerous. It's when they abuse that's the problem. And I think she's saying yes to that. Yeah, and I figured you meant that, Dorothy. I didn't assume the difference.
Well, it's time to go.
Yeah, we got
lots
to
of comments. Sarah, sorry guys, I know you can't comment on politics.
Sir, we're not mad at you. You guys can talk about that as much as you want.
Dorothy says, I'm not saying take that ability away, but who makes sure that they don't use it wrongly? Don't we all want to be free? If some of us are not free, then all of us are not.
Yeah, there isn't enough accountability in place Where, I mean, from the research I've done, police chiefs, their hands are tied. Their hands are totally tied. They really can't lay off an officer
Crazy.
who abuses their authority.
Dorothy says accountability does not mean they cannot ever use force. Did I read that already? It just means someone looks at the issue behind why they used it to make sure people aren't being hurt.
Yeah, you're right, Dorothy. I'm with you. We're on the same page.
Susan says, watch Birth of a Movement. African American, especially men, have been criminalized in white America's consciousness. Melody. Hi, Melody. I think Brian has a point. White people who struggled wouldn't feel privileged. Perhaps there is a different way to frame it. I think if we can share it as a comparison, it doesn't mean you lived a privileged life as a white person, but in some situations, if you have a black person and white person going for the same thing, a loan, for example, and they were the same in every way except color, with a racist loan officer, the black person would not get the loan because he would not be looked at as a viable candidate for a loan. That's an example.
And that just happened. I mean, it happened all throughout the 60s and 70s during white flight, where home ownership was held from African Americans through banks and loans and stuff. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I'm glad you understand where I'm coming from, Melody. It's not that I disagree with the principle. It's that sometimes we have to change the words because they don't help.
Yeah. Yes. Donella, great point. She says, Deborah, we love you too. She says, I had a super great, awesomely black privileged childhood. My daddy even had two yachts.
I want to ride.
But at the end of the day, I was still black and reminded by never being treated as kindly as my white friends. So you're right when you speak of privilege of just the actual skin color is privilege in the USA.
Yeah, no, and that's the opposite point that's so important, is that it also doesn't mean that there aren't African Americans who lived a great privileged life. That's right.
Yeah, it's true.
Like in terms of affluence and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hollis, I'm going to give you the link to the daily podcast. It explains the police system that... Can you explain again, Brian?
I think it's a criminal justice journalist who talks about the 7 reasons that really it's almost impossible to hold officers who abuse their authority in check. And to me, it's a list of things that we can fix, if you look at it that way.
Yeah. Roseanne says, one of our favorite... Oh, we are, okay. The Innocence Project, you love that, and Sarah loves that. She loves, Roseanne loves The Innocence Project.
Oh, yeah. No, in fact, there's a great documentary right now on Netflix called The Innocence Files, I think it's called. Is that what it's called?
I don't know. But I know what you're talking about.
And it highlights some of the work in particular areas of the Innocence Project. My wife's dream is to get a law degree and work for the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever be realized, but...
Netflix. Let me see what it is. The Innocence Files.
Yeah, The Innocence Files.
Yeah.
That's for free if you're a Netflix member. Hard stuff to watch, but The Innocence Project is really, really helpful to look at the criminal justice system in itself. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, even though, I mean, we could talk about race issues, there are some great flaws in even how forensic evidence is applied to cases in ways that's totally unfair. And you see a story of a white guy who's thrown in jail for decades on really horrible forensics.
Yeah. Lots of comments. We love you guys. We go back and read them. I'll be commenting and replying to many of you. Rob is saying thank you for dealing with these difficult topics. Mike as well. Melody saying we appreciate you guys taking on these things. And just glory to God and thankful to see many leaders and many believers like